Introducing NASM One, NASM's ultimate membership program. Unlock access to everything your fitness career needs to succeed. Unlimited CEUs, free courses, access to our premium app, and exclusive discounts, all for $35 a month. NASM One is best-in-class tools, cutting-edge certifications, confidence in your craft, and everything you do as a personal trainer made easy, so we can achieve our greatest goals together as one.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Master Instructor Roundtable. I am Wendy Batts here with my friend and colleague, Marty Miller. Marty, how are you?
Great today, Wendy. How about yourself?
I am doing very well. Today's topic, we are actually going to have a very special guest joining us, someone that we've had on multiple times because of her expertise in nutrition. So before we get kind of too very deep in how everyone's doing and the weather, we're going to bring Kat Barefield on, and Kat is going to be joining us talking about today's topic of nutrition education and trends. And Kat is the VP of Nutrition Services at .fit, as well as a registered dietitian. She's also one of our NASM Nutrition Master Instructors. And so, Marty, I'm going to go ahead and bring Kat on.
Love it.
Hey, good to see y'all.
How are you?
Wonderful. Happy to be here.
Well, thanks for having us.
Yeah, Kat, we can't thank you enough for coming in. We love the opportunity to talk nutrition because, you know, it's one of those industries that's ever changing, evolving. There's more and more research coming out. So really, truly, you know, someone who dabbles in that area, but not an expert like you are, it's always good for me to hear from you. And I know that our NASM family thinks the exact same way. So just to jump in right off the bat, as one of the reviewers and writers of the NASM Certified Nutrition Coach, you know, tell us who would benefit from taking this course, please.
Everyone.
Great answer.
So, I mean, especially fitness professionals, because, you know, we're at the point of time where chronic disease, I think obesity and overweight, we're at like over 74% or 72%. And, you know, that's all tied to nutrition and how we eat and our daily behaviors. So fitness professionals, I believe, need to have a good working knowledge around at least some basic nutrition principles, where to get their information from, what's considered good evidence, right? The sources that you need to consider, and just how to evaluate basic nutrition principles, including, you know, the trends, the fad diets, the different strategies that people use, because their clients are going to ask them. If you're a trainer, you're going to get asked about nutrition. It's inevitable. So I feel like if you don't have a working knowledge, you're a bit at a disadvantage, right? That's my thought process.
Well, that can, you know, for those we saw on Facebook, and I saw that, that's why we wanted to kind of bring you in on this topic, especially with you being one of the writers and being pretty much over all the different chapters. Can you kind of give us a brief outline of what does the CNC consist of? I mean, again, you're like talking about general guidelines, but just kind of what they can expect if they go through this course.
Okay, so like basic science, right? So basic science around nutrition, the macronutrients, protein, carbs, fats. You know, they probably get that question all the time related to, well, how much protein should I eat? And what about carbohydrates, which are good, which are bad? So it's going to cover the science in that regard. A little bit about metabolism, basic principles of nutritional metabolism. It'll dive into dietary supplements. How many clients ask you about which supplements are good? Which ones should I take? So it'll cover that as well. Scope of practice. A lot of fitness professionals are concerned about not doing anything out of their scope of practice. So we cover that in the course as well. And then, of course, you got to know a little bit about how people change, right? We're all creatures of habit. So there's a section on behavior change and how to actually get people to change, different techniques you could use to help people change and create better habits. And then the coaching aspect, which is the final section of the course, is how do I coach my client into healthy behaviors. So, some of the concerns about, well, this is not going to make me, I still can't prescribe this and that. Well, it's okay. You don't need to, because most people just need to make better choices and need to learn how to make those choices fit in the context of their life and their preferences. And that's what this course does.
That's great. Thanks for explaining that, Kat. And a lot of our NASM family, they're, have multiple certifications or credentials through NASM. And this is a question that comes up all the time. How would you say the, NASM Certified Sports Nutrition Coach or the CNC, how does that compare to the other main courses that have been in the industry for a period of time? And, I know the advantage of taking, ours, but, I'm sure that as a writer, you digested all that, I guess, pun intended, and looked at what needed to be in there. Can you discuss
Yeah.
that a little bit?
Yeah. Okay, so I got to go through the precision nutrition certification, the level one, and they do a good job too. We actually are friends with, the founder of PN, John Berardi. We've done some collaboration with him, so they do a pretty good job covering the science of nutrition. They have a specific approach. They call it the PN approach that they cover in their course. They also go through the coaching process. So there were some things that were in the course at the time. I don't know if they've modified it or not, that were not considered evidence-based. So I was a little bit, this is interesting. Maybe that has changed. And then just looking at some of the pros and cons of precision nutrition, the cost is significantly higher, I think, for precision nutrition. It might be $300 more or so. But other than that, it wouldn't be a bad choice. I'm a little bit biased because I'm a contributor to the CNC. But either one would give a pretty good working knowledge, right? And then with the CNC, you could build on it if you wanted to go with weight loss as a specialty, or if you wanted to go into sports nutrition and you're interested in working with athletes and helping athletes perform better and recover better, then you could, sort of. So I look at it as like a path, if you will, right? CPT. And then for me, the next choice would be, you're probably going to be working with people who are overweight or obese, have chronic disease. CNC, if you want to dive into weight loss and sort of get into more of the nitty gritty around weight loss, then take the weight loss specialty. If your interest is in athletes and you want to work around athletes and maximize nutritional strategies with athletes, then take the CSNC. All these acronyms that NASM loves to use. I would do that. And then of course on the exercise side, you could geek out as much as you want on the exercise side with CES and PES and all the other things you guys create.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Kat.
So Kat, we were talking about, the CNC, so the Certified Nutrition Coach, and then you just said the CSNC, which is our sports nutrition. Can you go into a little detail, because you just said it? I mean, if you want to work with athletes, you want to go and take the CSNC. However, what if you don't really know? Like, you want to get a good foundation, but your goal is to maybe work with athletes. Like, if you took the CSNC, would that be beneficial to use even with your everyday clients, or should they go more CNC and then kind of later on dive deeper into the CSNC? Does that make sense?
I think if you don't know and you're kind of dabbling, then CNC is it's again, to me, it goes hand in hand, CPT and CNC. I mean, we're at that time where it's like, if we're not coaching people on nutrition, you're not going to get it in your doctor's office. And most people don't go to me for a dietitian, because again, that has to be covered with insurance, or people have to come out of pocket. They're going into gyms, they're hiring trainers. That's much more accessible, if you will. So again, all fitness professionals, in my opinion, should have a good working knowledge of nutrition. So if you don't know, you're kind of, take the CNC, and they'll give you a good basis. And you might find out, I don't want to do nutrition coaching at all. I'm going to just stick to training purely. Right? But at least you'll be able to have a good working knowledge to answer questions, dispel myths, go to credible resources. You'll be a trusted resource in that regard. Right. So it kind of might help steer you and give you a good working foundation all at the same time.
Love it. Love it. So as we move forward, there's a topic out there now that we all need to address. Wendy and I did some information on it, but I really would like to hear about it from you as an expert, is the weight loss drugs, Ozempic. There's others. I've dug in a little bit to know enough to be dangerous, but I know that this is what you do each and every day. So, where can we go with this conversation, and where do you see it moving forward in the industry?
Yeah. So, I mean, they're definitely here to stay, in my opinion. So I think I mentioned we're now at, 74% of our adult population with overweight or obesity. And it's something that scientists have struggled to, figure out what the long-term solution is. And with these they're called GLP-1 agonists. Um, you know, the data's pretty strong in terms of efficacy for weight loss. You're seeing like 15 to 20% weight loss on average for individuals with obesity. Um, and that is significant. I mean, it's significantly different than, other methods. So I think that trainers need to know, because they're going to want to these people are going to want support. Like, well, what should I do nutrition wise? One of the major concerns, Marty, is the loss of lean mass and muscle mass. And so we know that that has detrimental effects on the body, on the metabolism, on functional strength, on quality of life. And two of the, ways to combat that are protein and resistance training.
Mhm.
So, trainers need to know that if you're taking one of these weight loss medications, it's even more critical to hit your daily targets for protein and to resistance train on a regular basis to combat the loss of lean.
Yep.
So,
And just to kind of piggyback off of that, Kat, NASM, they actually have evidence-based reviews that are on the NASM website. I didn't even know if you knew this either, but if you go to nasm.org and you look under resources and then you hit downloads, there's the evidence-based reviews. There's basically position papers, if you will, with our leading authorities in pharmacology and exercise that did they provided us with a lot of really great information of things that we needed to know as trainers as well. And so if you guys didn't know that that is in there, you definitely want to check it out, because like you said, this is here to stay. I see people that don't even have diabetes that are now taking this drug. And I'm trying to let them know the same thing that you said, like, diet, exercise is important, but then also too, what it can do to bone density long-term and all the other things that go hand in hand with that. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in there. So you guys, if you didn't know that we have these evidence-based reviews, you definitely want to check that out under our downloads.
ooh, I just found it. Thank you very much.
It's very well written. And like I said, these are, this isn't our opinion. This isn't just a trainer writing it. These are some leading authorities for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, there are certain side effects that people can experience it. A couple things that the drug does is it will affect appetite significantly. They call it reducing food noise. People don't have the same cravings. And really the shift in thought process is, moving from really, obesity being a choice versus it being a chronic disease like diabetes, which needs ongoing treatment. So you can see the shift in thought process around how people think of obesity, and we need to be open to that, because as you said, Marty, there's this ever-changing field, and there's always new research, and we can't be judgmental as trainers, right? We have to be open to what the research is showing.
No, that's great. Thanks for that, Kat.
Yes, sure. So Kat, when you're talking about protein, and again, I know we were kind of mixing that with Ozempic, but let's just go on to, the recent comparing of different doses of proteins. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Like, there's a study I think that you had talked to us about in conversation. I found it fascinating. So can you go into a little detail about just protein in general and what you're finding?
Eat it. No, I'm kidding. So, all right. So, I mean, the world we live in, right? Like the attention span of people is just like super short, like TikTok and Instagram. Like the shorter the content, the better. So, a lot of these headlines that come out through social media or through the news or whatever, they really are trying to catch an eye. And I think the latest one that we talked about was this study. I think Tromelin was the lead author, and he basically took, healthy, recreationally trained guys and gave them either 0 grams of protein post-exercise or 25 grams or 100 grams. And so to put this in context, the body of evidence shows that around 25 or 30 grams or sort of maximizes muscle protein synthesis. And so that's accepted to be sort of the optimal dose around supporting muscle growth and such. So this study in particular, and they used sophisticated isotope tracers to measure muscle protein synthesis over a 12-hour span, showed that muscle protein synthesis continued to increase over a longer period than had been shown previously. And so everybody was just sort of freaking out about, oh my gosh, so I can eat more. Maybe I should eat 100 grams. The fitness industry, it's like if some is good, then more is better type thought process. So people are like, well, I'll just eat 100 grams. So can we talk about like what it looks like to eat 100 grams of protein? Like, what are we talking about? I mean, one egg has 6 or 7 grams. Hello. Like a chicken breast has like 20 to 25 grams. I mean, are you going to eat 4 chicken breasts at a time, or how many eggs is that? Like it's not practical. So I think it was a good paper to maybe open up additional research to follow up to see how it's going to translate to not just muscle protein synthesis, but is this going to help me gain more muscle over time? One, and can I even practically do this? Mm-hmm. And to their defense, they did use milk protein. So maybe it's easier to consume 100 grams of milk protein, right? I mean, then you're talking digestive issues and milk allergies and lactose. I mean, so I think that we need to just pump the brakes. Right? What the body of evidence shows to date, and you'll learn this in CNC if you take it, right? Is that, meeting total daily targets for protein is probably the most important thing, right? In other words, amount trumps timing for the vast majority of people. So you're going to want to hit, the recommended amounts for active individuals, which is around 1 gram per pound of lean body mass, or if you're not in the United States, 1.6 gram per kilogram body weight. And that's going to support most fitness goals. There's some evidence that shows more can benefit certain individuals, but get your total amount in, right? And then timing becomes more important the higher level you go in terms of a sport, whether it's physique athlete or any type of sport, or even with age. Like as you become older, then it becomes more important to maybe distribute your protein across the day than younger individuals. So long answer to a question.
That's a great answer, Kat. And I am one of those in the previous days of the over protein consumer, but that was a guy growing up in the late 80s, early 90s with all those other supplements. So, good to know that 25 is that target. So I appreciate that. But for those of you just joining in today on the Master Instructor Roundtable, I'm Marty Miller here with my co-host, Wendy Batts, and we have a very special guest talking all things nutrition, education, trends, Ms. Kat Barefield, registered dietitian, NASM contributor. Very lucky to have her here. So as we move forward, a topic I'd like to talk about is the green drinks. There's many out there, and I am now a believer and love the new product by DotFit. So if you want to talk about the Super Blend, we know with DotFit what's on the bottle's in the bottle. But if you can talk about, does that compare to some of the other powdered or the green drinks that are out there, and then the importance of having that as well in your diet?
Okay, good. So this is a good segue. So this is a great segue because you have to know about supplements if you're a fitness professional, because in the United States, the way supplements are made, right? They're not pre-approved. They don't go through a pre-testing process. Like that is all voluntary. So a lot of times in the supplement industry, manufacturers can make products that don't have proper dosages and have not been independently tested to verify purity and potency and efficacy. So you'll learn that in the CNC too, by the way. So that's to set the stage for that. So not all supplements are equal, right? So to your point, one of the things that we did to make a greens product is we looked at the research. This is how we do everything at DotFit. We look at the research and we go, okay, what does the research show in terms of, what works? Where's the evidence? And then what dosages do we need to put in the product to make sure that people consume and get a benefit from that, right? So then we match that, and then we make it, and we got to make it taste good, which is a whole nother conversation. And then we send it to NSF Internationals, NSF Certified for Sport, which is considered, the gold standard for independent third-party testing. And then they test it for purity and potency. So back to your question, right? What do I think of the greens product? Well, when I did some of the research on make these greens product, you actually get to look at the dosages and how these products were formulated. And one of those most popular ones out there, they do heavy marketing. If you listen to any kind of podcast, or you'll hear, plugs for this greens product. I looked at it and I'm like, it doesn't have greens.
Oh,
Wow.
Like, wow, it does not have greens. And so that's something to be wary of is, look, I mean, if you don't know what you're looking for, and I'm biased, right? Because we made a product like this. But then I don't know if you guys are familiar with Dr. Rhonda Patrick. She's a scientist. She does a Found My Fitness podcast. She does all kinds of her postdoc, and her background is on micronutrients and supplements. And she came out the other day saying Athletic Greens is at best a quality multivitamin. It has a minuscule amount of greens. So all this to say that you may not be getting your greens. That's what you're taking it for. But if you're looking to get a daily multivitamin, as long as it's got some of the key multivitamins that you're typically missing in your diet, it could be beneficial in that regard, right? So we as fitness professionals, this is the type of stuff we got to be able to guide people properly. So not a fan of most of the greens products out there because they just don't put greens in, but they market it as green. So it's a little deceptive in my opinion.
So
right?
can you talk about when you say they don't have the greens in them, like if somebody's looking at this green product, what should they be looking for? Because, again, when you look at a label, I'm trying to pronounce it. You're like, no, I mean, am I looking, because me, if you say greens, I'm thinking kale, I'm thinking green beans.
Right. Yeah. So one of the things that we did, the way we approached it was, because you can imagine all the different greens that are out there, right? Like, I mean, so what do we know? Well, we know that people need to consume at least 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, and that people don't typically get that, right? So one of the products that we found in a way that people could increase their nutrition and their micronutrient status was we actually found a company that made servings of basically dehydrated veggies. And so we put in 2 servings of this particular product, and it's actually an approved FDA claim. So you go for what's evidence-based, but the problem is most consumers don't know.
Right.
They don't know. But there are things you can look at. Like you can look at if you see a greens, see a green section on a product and it has 30 plus ingredients in it, and then the dosage of it is in milligrams, that's probably a red flag. How can you have 30? How are you going to have 30 different ingredients and it's in milligrams and that's supposed to replace my veggies? Does that make sense? It doesn't make sense. And then you look at the fiber in it. And if there's very little fiber in it, well, that too is okay, well, I don't know. I mean, fiber is sort of an indicator. So if it's got very minuscule amounts of fiber, that's also, in my opinion, something to look at.
So super blend it.
Blend, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound because I know I am biased because I did help with the formula, but this is the stuff we geek out on. It's we just make things the right way, and then we independently third-party test it to make sure. I mean, and it's so sad because in the supplement industry or in social media, everybody wants to be an influencer, and a lot of times they don't know what they're talking about.
That is fair. That's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother podcast, right?
Right.
So Kat, here's one that I have a theory on, and I've never really had a chance to talk to you or Neil. So I'm throwing this out to you live here. Is I see, I understand supplementation, vitamins, things like that. Maybe there's not as much in there. And maybe I always just say you're making expensive urine if it's not doing what it's supposed to do for you. But all of these testosterone boosters, here's my theory is if they actually did it, I would think there's legalities. Number two, do people not realize that if you're messing with your hormones, there's other things you need to take to balance your hormones? So God forbid if they do work. So just throwing it out there, what's your thoughts on those quote unquote supplements that are supposed to change male hormones?
Yeah. So I think it's good marketing, bad science, to sum it up, right? I mean, if you are, first of all, people are taking these products because they have some subjective experience that tells them their testosterone is low. It's not like they're going to get the doctor and get their testosterone levels checked and that their testosterone levels are at a clinically low level, right? So that's not what's happening. What's happening is an infomercial is telling you, hey, do you have low libido? Do you have brain fog? It must be your testosterone. Take this testosterone booster, right? Even though there's no hard data to back it up and there's no science showing that you can boost your testosterone with a dietary supplement. Now, remember, dietary supplements by definition are ingredients typically found in nature. Right? If you have clinically low levels of testosterone, there is nothing in nature that's going to take you out of that deficiency state. It has to be a medication. So, a good marketing from experience.
Yeah,
Is
and
my
this
answer.
is a follow-up. My worry is if it had worked, you're now creating all kinds of other hormonal things that need to be only done under the guidance of medical professionals. So it's like either it's not going to work or you're going down another bad path either way.
Okay, and so we get to this part about dietary supplements, right? And so here's what happens is a lot of times some of these supplements are tainted with illegal substances or prescription drugs so that people experience a physical effect from it. And so they're like, oh yeah, it's working, but it's actually a tainted product. Isn't that scary? Yeah.
It's very scary. So,
Yeah.
well, I'm definitely staying away from that.
Yeah. I mean, if you have some thought process about your hormones being out of whack, whether you're a guy or a gal, you go to your doctor and hopefully you see an endocrinologist, you get your measures tested, and then you work with a professional. You don't just dabble into this, especially if you're not taking independently tested supplements and you're not monitoring your health somewhat. So I would stay away. And, again, this is what I call people majoring in minor things, right? Like they want a testosterone booster, but they don't sleep well. They don't eat well. They don't exercise consistently. They're not getting outside in nature. And so they're not doing the major things, but they want to focus on the minors.
Love it.
I'm not, I hope it doesn't come across as judgmental, but it's just people want these magic quick fixes and they don't ignore or they overlook how much these little quick fixes or things that they don't move the needle that much. You can do so much more under your control to enhance your quality of life in the way that you feel.
No question. Great answers. Thanks for that, Kat.
Yeah. Well, and I have a question, and this is because we're talking about the trends part of it. So you've kind of been able to teach us a lot about the courses that NASM offers, which is one of the reasons why we brought you in. And then now Marty and I are like, let's talk about the trends. So I have a girlfriend that has been doing this continuous glucose monitoring. She's like, you got to do this. Like, it is amazing when you realize that if you bake a potato versus boil it, what it does to your glucose. And she's got this app. I look into it. It's wicked expensive of what she's doing. So I have a client that is pretty wealthy, has dabbled in it and was like, hey, I've got these monitors. I want to give it to you. Just download the app. You check it out. So my question to you, Kat, is what are your thoughts about this continuous monitoring? Because I don't want to sit there and inject this little thing on the back of my tricep and wear it for a month just because, it's not going to tell me anything I don't already know, or maybe maybe I should. So what are your thoughts?
So the best application at this point with continuous glucose monitors are people with glucose or blood sugar dysregulation. So people with prediabetes, diabetes that need to control their blood sugar, and they want to learn and increase their knowledge about how their food choices impact their blood sugar and how to keep them in that range. So now I think what you're talking about is people that are otherwise healthy, they don't have glucose regulation, and they're using it as a metric to make different food choices. And what I'm concerned about in that regard is, could it potentially lead to disordered eating or obsessive tendencies around certain food choices? And then you sort of like lose yourself, right? What's that saying? You lose the forest from the trees. Like you're just so like, you don't get the big picture because you're so focused on how your blood sugar is impacted. And what people need to realize is, do you even know what normal blood sugar levels are supposed to be after you eat? Like, blood sugar rises after you eat, right? Like that's not necessarily a bad thing. Are you going to freak out if you eat a bunch of carrots and then your blood sugar goes up? so that's a normal process for that to happen, for it to go up and it to go down. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad food. Right. I think the glycemic index studies showed us that, is that it's not necessarily mean it's a bad food for you, or that it's going to have negative health effects. So I would say for most people, it's not really worth the money, or the mental like anxiety, if you around it. Like again, let's focus on the big things, right? Eating more whole foods, getting your daily protein intake in. I mean, I sound like a grumpy old lady, I swear, but I mean, you sort of have to unpack these things for people, right? Don't I wouldn't waste my time or my money on it yet. If you're wealthy, you don't mind it. You're very conscious that you're not going to get obsessive. You're not going to, be nitpicking on everything, and you're sort of using it as a fun tool to learn, then okay. But it's not something I would recommend for most individuals.
That's great. Now, Kat, I can't thank you enough. There's so much information that I know. I'm writing notes, and I'm already like, okay, we'll have to have her back for another podcast, because there's just so many things that are out there. But as you said at the very beginning, if there's just a couple key takeaways, it's not going to hurt anybody to take the CNC, because at the end of the day, you're going to learn more about your everyday diet, even if you didn't have these conversations with your clients. But to have that baseline of understanding, so when you see things thrown out within the industry, you have more working knowledge to kind of decipher, hey, is this legit? Is it not legit? So, Wendy and I always talk about the CNC as one of our staples within the industry. But, Kat, I'll throw this over to Wendy, see if she's got any last takeaways. But thank you so much for such impactful and insightful information. It's always a pleasure. And I definitely, we will be planning on having you back again here in the near future.
Yes. And Kat, like I said, every time you come on, I'm like, I'm the same. I'm like taking notes as it goes full screen. So that way I'm like, oh, this is really good. And we could keep you on here probably for hours. But to Marty's point, you covered a lot of different things. But if you had to give us 3 takeaways, I mean, besides, we know that you should continue your education. And if you're dabbling in education, you want to look at the courses that are going to benefit you. Marty just said that. You mentioned that, talked about what we have to offer and why we think it's very beneficial. However, when you're talking about these trends, which is a little bit different outside of the education component, what are the top 3 things you want to leave with us today?
In terms of trends?
Yeah.
So one of the big trends out there, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's the carnivore diet. And it could just be the circles that I'm in, but the carnivore diet, where you're basically eating all animal products. So here's a red flag. If you have people telling you to eliminate an entire food groups, and in this case, it's only eat one food group, it's a pretty extreme approach. So it's a red flag. And unless you're doing that for medical reasons, for example, if you have celiac disease, then yes, you have to follow gluten-free. So unless you're doing it for medical purposes, it's a red flag when people tell you to avoid entire food groups. Okay. And then when you do, if you do avoid entire food groups, you are going to be missing micronutrients or things that your body requires. So again, when you take the CNC, you're going to learn, right? Your body just doesn't need macros, it needs micros. So it needs these 32, 35 essential vitamins and minerals. Most of them are found in nature. So if you're limiting whole food groups, you're going to not be getting those micronutrients that your body requires for aspects of your metabolism. So there's going to be a trade-off. So I would say look out for that. Like the carnivore diet, when you eliminate all those other food groups, you're gonna definitely have an impact in health. And then some of the data I'm seeing is that you're gonna see an increase in cholesterol, particularly LDL cholesterol, which is associated with a higher risk of cardiovascular disease. So that's not something. It's not a type of diet that I would recommend for most people, right? The other things that I'm seeing, which is a good thing, is that this whole body of research around creatine in women. Right now, women's health is a big deal nowadays. Like women want to know, how do I optimize my health? How do I deal with menopause or my menstrual cycle? And so Abby Smith Ryan over at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, I believe, she's doing a bunch of research with creatine in women. And so let's just dispel some myths right off the bat. First of all, creatine's natural. It's made in the body, right? Your kidneys, produce it. You get it from meat. But if you were to take an amount that would be beneficial to you, you'd have to eat like a cow. I'm exaggerating, like, half a dozen chicken breasts or something. Whereas you could just take 5 grams of creatine a day. So what do we see in terms of trends or research with creatine in women? Well, first of all, you're not going to gain a whole bunch of weight. That's what women are afraid of. It's going to make me gain weight, right? So if you look at the data, women are either not gaining weight or they're gaining around a half a pound. And that weight is in muscle tissue, right? It's intracellular water, muscle, which is good for hydration purposes. Now, another thing that women need to be wary of is muscle mass, right? So we know at 30, you can start to lose muscle, 40 is faster, 50 it's even faster, and then it goes downhill from there. So creatine helps to retain muscle mass, which indirectly supports metabolic rate. So that's a good thing. And then here's this. Creatine has been shown to be supportive in women during their menstrual cycle in terms of boosting symptoms of anxiety and depression and even postpartum depression. So it's this exciting sort of field that I don't know that a lot of people are talking about. I don't know if we see TikToks on it. Have you guys seen TikToks or Instagram reels on creatine in women? But it's like, we want to age gracefully, right? We want to age strong. So this is an area that I think that if you're close to, staying evidence-based and, you're getting your information from, NASM and downloading these position papers and such, that you could really keep up with stuff that's really can move the needle for people. Okay, so creatine in women. Oh, vegan, plant-based, right? Okay, here's what I would say. Don't get your nutrition information from documentaries.
Netflix, girl. Don't watch it. I saw it. I know where you're going with this, and it's so bad.
Don't get your nutrition information solely from documentaries. Now, they're entertaining. They're meant to be entertaining. So in order for something to be entertaining, it's got to be controversial, right? Typically, or it's got to have some kind of scandal or whatever. Now, that's not to disregard the actual study that what's it called, Wendy? You Are What You Eat. Is that what it's called? The latest one?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
They have identical twins on this documentary, and they're doing one that's plant and one that's carnivore.
Yeah. So they're sort of pitting vegans versus meat eaters, and which one's better for overall health. And they sort of took this 8-week study in twins and put half of them on a vegan diet, half of them on a meat eating diet. And they're like, after 8 weeks, we saw a greater weight loss in our vegans and lower LDL cholesterol. Therefore, a vegan diet is the superior diet. Go vegan. Right? What they don't tell you is, well, if you're on a vegan diet, well, first of all, for the results, that they didn't control for calories. Mm-hmm. So we don't know, was it that they ate lower calories or was it the actual food components itself? So you don't know, because anytime people lose weight, they're going to see improvement in their biomarkers, their cholesterol, a lot of times their blood pressure, blood sugar, etc. So we don't really know if it was the vegan diet or if it was just because they lost weight, right? The other side to that is when you go vegan, what are you doing? You're eliminating a whole food group. So therefore, you're eliminating micronutrients. And we know that vegan diets tend to be short on certain micronutrients like vitamin D, like vitamin B12, like calcium. And if you're lacking in all these micronutrients, well, there's going to be a cost to that at some point. So you might get a better, improvement in LDL cholesterol, but if you don't cover your bases over here with certain micronutrients, then you might be putting yourself at greater risk for problems later on. So don't get your nutrition information solely from documentaries.
And just to piggyback off of that, you also, if you are going to watch this, you have to think exactly what Kat just said, and then look who sponsored it, who paid for that documentary, because this one was paid for by Impossible Meats. Just saying.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe
now,
there's something to be said there.
Yes. And here's the funny thing about it as well. Like vegans are like, oh, don't eat ultra processed foods, eat mostly whole foods, et cetera, which I'm a fan of. But Impossible Meat is a very processed product. It's highly processed. You're getting plants and trying to turn it into meat. I mean, it goes to significant.
That's so
Well,
good.
common sense, right? Head scratcher. That's a common sense one. Kat, thank you so much for today. Yeah. I wrote a note down. We will have you back, and maybe we'll focus the next time on women's health and nutrition, because it is different, right? You can't have a generic approach to both males and females. So, Wendy, we'll put it on the calendar. But Kat, we can't thank you enough for your time and professionalism today. We will definitely have you back. And Wendy, thanks for lining this up and all the great questions. And for those of you that joined us today, thank you so much. And of course, we look forward to seeing you on next week's Master Instructor Roundtable.